That's right. This is Conf T with your SE. I am your host, Bryan Young. We've got another great episode planned for today. We're going to be talking about penetration testing, something that is definitely coming up in a lot of conversations with customers these days, and I think for very valid reasons, as we're going to be covering today. With me today, I am joined by two people from Secure Network Technologies. This is an organization that Driven has partnered up with to be able to perform penetration testing and a couple other services in terms of, testing your security setup. So with me today, I've got Megan Scherer and Ryan Wager. How are you guys? Thanks for joining.
Great. It's fun to be on here. Normally I'm listening to your podcast on a run, so it's weird to actually be on it.
Nice. No, I appreciate appreciate you guys coming on. Let's just go through some introductions. Megan, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll go over to Ryan.
Awesome. So, Bryan, it's been wonderful working with you so far. It's fun getting that call one day, and now all of a sudden I'm on your podcast. So, yeah. So
Pretty quickly too.
I know exactly. So I'm a security consultant with the company. I've been with Secure Network for about just over 3 years. And I have the beauty working alongside our engineers, one being Ryan and the rest of our team. So I work on the scoping side, more on the sales front, and also project management side. So it's been a whirlwind. Fun part about this industry, it's never boring, that's for sure.
That is true. I think a lot of our episodes on the podcast, especially lately, have been around security. It's definitely something that's top of mind, and I'm pretty sure I just saw an article today about 3 emergency rooms getting locked down or not being able to function because of some type of cyber attack just today. So it's never ending. Ryan, how about you introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah, so Ryan Wager here. I'm a security engineer with Secure Networks. I've been here a few years now. Prior to that, I cut my teeth in the healthcare space. Spent about 10 years working my way up through the ranks. I held titles as the information security manager, IT manager, before shifting gears and started with the contracting with the Department of Homeland Security for a little bit. Did pen testing, critical infrastructure all throughout the U.S., did that for a little while, then joined SNT back in 2020, 2021. So yeah, it's been a couple years now.
Wow. So let's dive into that. I think is my first kind of question, especially for listeners that may want to get into penetration testing. I remember, and I think I told you guys this story when we were talking, that I had come across some certification. I think it was licensed penetration tester, and I thought that would be like the coolest title to have ever. So, like, how does one get into this line of work? I mean, how do you get started and kind of get the ability to do the bad things and not get arrested for it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of a weird shift in the industry right now, where individuals can now just jump right into pen testing. They can jump right into the security functions. I myself, like I said, I spent quite a bit of time at that kind of sysadmin role. So I was, hands-on, managing Windows servers, Linux boxes, did that for a while before kind of moving up to more of a management role. But really that's kind of where it started. Just learning the technology, being around it. Myself, I was also very fortunate because I held a position in a telemedicine organization. So I got to work with different healthcare facilities all throughout the U.S., implementing our services. So it was really good hands-on experience with all these different technologies out there. And so for me, that's really helped me progress my career as just a pen tester and just security practitioner in general. But like I said, there are a lot of programs out there now, boot camps, college curriculum that you can now sign up for. That this wasn't available back in my day. So, like I said, there is a shift in the industry, but there are a few different ways to get into it if you really wanted to. So, yeah.
Nice. So you don't have to be that hacker that kind of starts off as a script kiddie and gets arrested, and then they're given, the option, hey, if you want to turn your life around.
Yeah, not everybody needs to go down that path for sure. So, I mean, but there's a lot of labs online. There's online resources. There's just so much out there these days.
Nice. Yeah, there's YouTube has a ton of stuff on it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Awesome.
So,
So, what kind of trends are you seeing in the industry as of lately? And I don't know if Megan, if you want to take a shot at this one first. But what are some of the trends that could really kind of make pen testing a necessity these days?
We see a few different things. We work from anywhere from a small four-person nonprofit all the way up to a Fortune 500 company. Very different. Believe it or not, we get a lot of comments saying, well, I don't have anything that a threat actor would want. That's the
Yep.
number one conversation. And if you have money, they want to hack you. If they can hold anything for ransom, right? That's the goal.
yeah,
Right.
And even just going into that in a little bit more detail, the people who we talk to most often are forced to do it for compliance or cyber insurance. That's the
Mm.
number one discussion across the table. So when we sit down with an organization, each one's a little bit different. They have different infrastructures that, Ryan, I'm sure you can relate to. But really, we're trying to find out what's the goal behind it. Is it proactive? Is it compliance? Or is it cyber insurance, right? Um,
Hmm.
I would love to say everybody's being proactive. I would say that's a small percentage of what we see today. But even, car dealerships, for example, last June, they were required to do now a risk assessment and address the risk. You figure how much PII and PHI do they have? How many credit cards do they hold? Makes me think twice about getting a car sometimes. Um, but it's starting to be a new conversation, right? That people are trying to realize, okay, what do I have in house that could be concerning for our customers, our vendors, or even just keeping our organization up and running? Um, I know that's addressing a lot of things. Cyber insurance, oh my goodness. People just trying to get their renewals in place, right?
Mm.
They're getting these questionnaires that are, the highest I've heard is about 40 pages. Brian, I don't know
Wow.
what you've come across with your clients.
Did we lose Ryan?
No, I said
He's
Brian.
very
See,
still.
here's the problem. It's Brian and
Uh
Ryan. Oh, we must have lost Ryan for a
I think we
second.
did lose Ryan.
Oh,
Uh
darn it.
We'll figure that out.
Well,
We'll keep going for now. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I haven't seen too much in terms of the exact requirements around cyber insurance, but I do know those rules have been getting a lot stricter in terms of you need to do a lot. You need to have a lot in place. You need to show disaster recovery plans. Like they are definitely looking at, like any insurance company would, right? Like what is the risk and
yeah.
what are you doing to minimize that risk? And it sounds like the pen testing stuff is really, proactive and kind of forcing those organizations to be proactive and say, listen, you say you have all these tools in place, you say you have all these processes in place, have you tried them out? So yeah, that it makes sense that the cyber insurance would be a huge push for that.
And what's tough is going back to the compliance standpoint, because you have those three main factors there. Um, it's very broad. These compliance regulations are very, very broad.
Right.
So now you have, let's say, we'll go back to the car dealership portion. They are coming across, they've never had a pen test, they've never really been cybersecurity focused. And all of a sudden they're told to identify the risk. And that's pretty much all it says. Well, what does
Mm,
that mean? Are you going through policy and procedures? Are you doing a pen test? It really depends on who's guiding you, which is nice why you have Driven that's going to talk to their clients to say, here's how we're going to help progress you, right? Otherwise,
right.
if you're just left to handle it in house, it can get sticky knowing that you're trying to figure out you're doing the right thing.
Right, right, and to pick on car dealerships a little bit too, like, you go there, you're looking at a car, and you have to fill out all this paperwork and whatnot, and a lot of times it's a single piece of paper that has been photocopied 10,000 times that you're writing all of your PII data on and your social and your maiden name, your last 14 addresses, and everything else. And what do they
Bingo.
do with that? Like what happens with that? They're photocopying your driver's license for a test drive and it just goes into a filing cabinet. Maybe it gets digitized. What happens with that data? Stuff like that. How long do they hold on to it? And it's, again, we're just picking on car dealerships here, but I think it's something to, to keep. I think it's a good example for sure.
Exactly. And, we were actually working with one car dealership. I won't share names, of course. But the thing is with that one, all their employees were using their phone to take pictures of the license plates, the registrations, all that information. Well, now it's on their personal devices.
Right.
It's concerning at that point. And everybody's just trying to stay operational. They have their own business needs. So I always go back to IT, cybersecurity, and actually operating a business are completely different things. And they don't always
They are.
go line in line.
Yeah, that's the problem, and especially if it's not something that you've done before, if it's not something that you have a dedicated IT team to that's very security minded, or a CISO, right, a seasoned CISO that understands the risks, and right, because let's face it, at the end of the day, the CISO's primary responsibility is to understand and minimize and accept risk. It's really about risk.
Yes.
So that's what they're going to be primarily focused on, making sure that those things are where they need to be, and that whatever is left is acceptable.
Exactly.
So unless you have that in your organization, you're going to be very, very lost in terms of how to even start filling out that form, or even, where do I even go for cyber insurance? What does it mean? What does it cover? Right? Because cyber insurance is not going to come into effect if it's something like a nation state or an act of war, right? And let's face it, we're in some pretty volatile times right now, where a lot of these types of cyber attacks that we're seeing, there's concern and hints and rumors of it being nation state backed, and then you're not going to get that insurance coverage there. So it's like it's kind of a weird world we're living in, for sure. And I think the other thing too that we were kind of talking about when we were doing the prep is the fact that if you have, besides an organization that really doesn't have a big security posture, on the flip side of that, you have these larger organizations that have all these silos. And they have a ton of vendors in place. They have a ton of separate teams and tools that they're using, and that's just as detrimental in many cases. And you'll have all these different silos that are like, yeah, we're good. It reminds me of the I don't know how true this is. I heard this story once, and I could be completely wrong on this, but apparently when Ford was developing the Pinto, this was the first time that they had kind of segmented the teams, because they needed to get this car like designed, engineered, and built really, really fast. And they were competing with another vehicle or whatever, I think from Chevy or whatever. So they had a team that was working on the drivetrain. They had a team that was working on the body. They had a team that was working on the suspension and the frame, right? And they all did their designs. They put this thing together in record time. They build the first prototype, and they're like, they're ready to go. They're already starting, to get all the tooling set to manufacture this thing. And they go, all right, let's put some gas in it, and let's start her up. And they're like, where's the gas tank? Because it was everyone else that was pointed as like, well, that's not a drivetrain thing. It's part of the body. The body team's like, well, that's not, it's whatever. So, and apparently that's why the tank is outside of the frame, because they'd already built and designed everything. So again, I don't know how true that is. It could be completely false. It could be some fake news there.
I'm going to go with it. That's interesting.
I like it, and I'm going to go with it. But that's the problem when you have all those different teams that are not looking at what everyone else is doing. If you don't have that oversight, you're going to be in just as bad shape as someone that doesn't have anyone.
Yeah, and that's it's checks and balances. So our founder always says you don't want to be the fox guarding the hen house, right? So that's something we really try to focus on. And, threat actors are getting more advanced. I mean, let's dive into now the difference of what's a scam versus a pen test, right? We have these conversations all day long. And there's no real standard to penetration testing, and Ryan, I'll let you dive into that a little bit more. But you want to make sure everything you're investing in, all your tools, your products, your rules, everything you're putting in place is actually working properly, right? So that's why we're in this space and trying to make sure that we're focused on cybersecurity and we work with managed service providers like Driven to actually focus on that portion and help you remediate. But Ryan, I'll let you go into the pen testing portion of really the differences of what we look at here.
Yeah. So pen testing and vulnerability scan, two big aspects to improving your security posture. But when it comes to vulnerability scanning, I believe that should play a larger role in just your patch management process, right? Making sure that you don't have unpatched software, that you don't have any sort of gaping vulnerabilities that are sitting out there. When we move into sort of the pen testing side, we're really going to try to find things that a vulnerability scan might not pick up. We're going to try to crack passwords. We're going to try to move around laterally throughout the environment, see if there's any sort of privilege creep that this particular user might have. And so we're really kind of taking vulnerability scanning to the next phase, and really making it very hands-on and practical in the sense that we're able to actually exploit those things, and demonstrate impact at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Do you see a lot of organizations really focusing on the vulnerability scanning and
Well, we do. We see a lot of organizations really focusing on it, but there's also kind of a problem in the industry right now is where we're seeing a lot of, these startups kind of coming out into the security space. And what they're doing is they're selling vulnerability scans as a pen test. And an organization who undergoes one of those type of assessments, they're really in a bad spot because it's very hard to protect what you don't know about. So at the end of the day, it's they might understand that they have some vulnerable software, maybe some unpatched Windows systems, but they don't really understand their actual risk within the environment. And so it makes it really difficult for them to defend against risks that they don't know about.
Right. I'm curious with a lot of organizations moving to cloud-based and SaaS-based applications. What's the pushback that you've seen from prospective clients that are like, hey, you know what, I'm not worried about vulnerability scanning or pen testing because I'm reducing my data center footprint. I don't really host anything on site. I'm using all these other services, right? And they're just kind of writing off the risk and pushing it to them. What are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah. So I mean, the cloud is a great thing. I mean, it really just kind of alleviates some of your physical requirements, right? So you don't need to really worry about hosting the VM anymore within hosting the physical machine or dealing with your storage area network and things like that. But it does introduce its own complexities and its own challenges. The cloud is very similar to your on-prem equipment. There's just a different way of doing things, and so you introduce some of that
someone else's computer.
Technical. You still have those technical issues that you need to address. I mean, it's I'm not for the cloud or against the cloud. I think that it has its purpose, but again, it's you can't just move things into the cloud and think everything's going to be okay. There's still some technical challenges that you're going to have to deal with, and make sure that you understand what those challenges are.
So whether you are mostly on-prem in terms of your applications and what you're hosting, or in the cloud or somewhere in between, which I think most customers are in that kind of hybrid space. It definitely is important to get a team with experience that like what you guys are doing, to be able to understand the intricacies of how are these things linked. Are there connections from this cloud resource or this IaaS kind of setup into your environment that can be leveraged? Because one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about the cloud, it's like all you're doing now is now everyone is putting their information into that vendor, right? And of course they have to, as stewards of that data, right? They need to have the policies and the procedures in place, and obviously they need to really take care of that data. But at the same time, you're still responsible to make sure that you understand what their policies are, in terms of, hey, do you do pen testing yourselves? Like, what kind of compliances are you held up against, and what are you doing to back up the data, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's very complicated.
Yeah, and Microsoft's one of the better ones. You can go on; they have their security in admin center, and they have a ton of documentation, security reviews, audits, things that they've done within their environment. And they're pretty clear. They have a nice little spreadsheet out there that will list some of the items that they're responsible for, mostly physical controls, and then they go through and they have other items that the client is responsible for. And so it's a good reference material if you're thinking about getting in that cloud space.
Nice. That's really cool. It's nice that they put together a framework
Right.
for that, because I think it's it's helpful, and it could probably be used and kind of adjusted for other types of services in the cloud as well.
Oh.
Cool. Megan, I got a question for you.
Of course.
So if we're gonna let's say I'm convinced, which I already am. I'm convinced like this is
Glad we sold
something
you on
I
it.
need. Oh, absolutely. This is something I need to do. I have no idea what I have. I have no idea what I don't have. I'm hybrid. I'm hybrid worker in terms of, where my users are sitting. I've got some tools here and there that I've got an overworked group of network admins and maybe some, quote unquote SOC analysts that are on my payroll that I have looking at stuff. But at the end of the day, I think I'm good, but I just don't know. Where do I start? How do I start an engagement with you?
So the good part about this assessment, just from the actual starting point, gives you an idea of, where you need to go for next steps, right? We talk about how you can buy all these products, you can put all these rules in place, you still don't know your gaps, and that's what we're trying to identify first and foremost. So typically, I love a call. I hate sending out a questionnaire. Nobody likes homework.
Nope.
I want to understand if they have any compliance regulations, if they're doing this for cyber insurance, as we mentioned, and really what they have infrastructure-wise. Ryan and his team, they're always going to start out with discovery and enumeration, but just general counts to know the complexity of their network. So looking at live IPs, desktops, routers, switches, getting a good understanding of what they have already is a good starting point, so we can put a scope together. We're talking about problems within the industry, right? So we have a lot of clients that are still solely focused on external penetration test. And the biggest thing you want to focus on is the inside of your network, which most people don't realize.
Right.
A threat actor is going to get through a phish, a smish, somebody's going to give up credentials, and now you have that adversary sitting inside your network. What
That
can they
soft,
see?
gooey center.
And yes, typically it's all flat and you can move all around, and that's fun for the team, but it's not fun when you go to the debrief and you're saying you've got a whole bunch of things you need to fix. So, it's having that conversation, and it makes me think, and Brian's going to giggle at this. We had somebody we were working with. We were about to start the engagement. He said, with the internal, I'm having a little buyer's remorse. And that's what every salesperson wants to hear, right? So we're like, what? And he's like, I just don't know if we need it. And Ryan, maybe you can talk about some of the things you actually found where like this is the most important aspect of a pen test.
So, yeah. So I'm just thinking about that job right now. It was a little bit of a doozy, yeah. So he was conducting vulnerability scans in a regular interval. Everything was coming back fairly clean. I mean, we even ran vulnerability scans ourselves, and they came back clean. But there were some other giant holes that he had within the network. For one, they were using, NTLM-v1, which is a deprecated protocol. It hasn't been, it's just not secure by today's standards. So you get hands on an NTLM-v1, which is a challenge response hash. You can essentially crack it in a few hours depending upon your rig. So that's exactly what we did. We were able to coerce one of the domain controllers to authenticate to us, ended up getting an NTLM-v1 hash, cracked it for a few hours. Next thing you know, we're sitting in the context of a domain controller machine account. If anybody's familiar with that, a DC account or domain controller machine account, it has the ability to replicate changes from other domain controller nodes. So at the end of the day, we were able to basically dump his entire NTDS database, ran it through a password audit, all that other fun stuff. But yeah, just little things like that typically don't show up in a vulnerability scan, but a
Right.
huge risk to the organization. Um, if a threat actor were to be in that organization, very likely that they would have, walked away with some data and then, locked them up at the end of the day. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm thinking about this as you're saying it, right? Like these automated tools that are out there. There's a lot of
yeah,
them, right? And I'll even put vulnerability scanning in that category, right? There's a ton of tools out there that are going to maybe check that
yeah,
box and maybe give you a lot of good, valuable information. But at the end of the day,
yeah,
they're still doing a set kind of programmatic thing, or a programmatic check. You really need someone that's thinking like a bad actor to be able to move and pivot and think on their feet and try to find out different ways to get around some roadblocks, because that's exactly what a bad actor is going to be doing
yeah.
in that scenario. So you really need that live person touch, especially someone that knows what the heck they're doing.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we've really adopted risk-based penetration testing. A lot of organizations, they'll go in there, they run the vulnerability scan, and that's your pen test. Well, at S&T, we take a risk-based approach to our pen testing. So when we talk about risk is essentially the likelihood that a threat actor would be able to exploit a vulnerability and what that impact would have on the organization as a whole. And so when we just look at that NTLM v1 example that we were just talking about, impact is huge, right? It led to complete domain compromise. And so what that does is it kind of reduces some of the noise in the pen test report. So we're focusing on items that you should really be concerned with as a client, versus just handing you a bunch of vulnerability scan data that just includes things like SSL, TLS version 1.0 or 1.1, things
Right.
that are just noise, which that should be addressed in just a vulnerability management program, right? So you should have your team that's looking at some of these vulnerabilities at regular intervals and then going through and remediating them. We're focusing on things that can be exploited, things that a threat actor would be able to execute. And we're really trying to, like I said, find those items that just don't show up in a vulnerability scan. Yeah.
No, that's good, and it's funny you mentioned the TLS thing, because I don't know if Megan, if you got a chance to listen to the last episode we just published last week on quantum computing,
I did
and we were
not.
talking about like the different algorithms and stuff that are going to have to be in place
Right.
once quantum computing becomes a thing, because quantum computing will basically crack any type of asymmetrical encryption. So that's any of your key exchanges and stuff like that. So things like TLS 1.0, 1.1, even 1.2 is going to just be obsolete as soon as that really comes around. So that kind of report is going to be important later when we have to move everything over from stuff that is vulnerable to quantum
Yeah.
computing, hacking, and stuff like that, to something that's a lot more robust against that. So, but for now, it's just a lot of noise.
Yeah. And Ryan, I'm sure you see the progression, right? So vulnerability scanning was still, that was the movement of the threat actors back in the day. That wasn't wrong.
Hmm.
Just now it's just noise,
Yeah.
right? You have to
Right.
look at other tactics, other techniques that the threat actors are leveraging. I mean, diving into MGM.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
mean, just looking at that one, that was essentially the main compromise was through a phishing call,
Right.
getting credentials to what was an Office 365 account.
Think
Yeah.
so.
No.
I
Yeah.
mean, and that point, they've got, they've got full access, right? And they're going undetected. So,
Right.
Ryan and I were really picking apart one of the things during their assessments the other day. They were saying that 50% of the time, they don't have to touch antivirus and
Right.
endpoint detection
Hmm.
because they have legitimate access. So you can invest
Right.
in all these products you want, but unless they're dumping a whole bunch of information, maybe you'll get detected at that point. But
Right.
how do you know you've locked things down properly if you haven't looked at the bigger picture?
Right. And this is something that in my previous role at Cisco, I talked a lot about with some of the network detection software that we sold, that was looking at things like traffic patterns, like something like a data exfiltration, stuff like that, where I'm noticing, hey, Ryan normally only uploads 5 gigs of data a day, and all of a sudden he's uploading 500. Those are kind of the behavioral analytics pieces, and there's definitely use cases for those. I know that even here at Driven, I've gotten a couple emails. Actually, when we're using this, the first time I was using this software to record a podcast, starting at Driven, I was getting emails and I didn't even realize it from the security team, and they're like, "Yeah, we're noticing a huge increase of data going up to this AWS site, and we just want to check on it." And I'm like, "Thank you for not pulling the plug." That's the podcast software that we use. That's Riverside. That's legit. Go ahead and whitelist that, please, because I'm going to be using it again. But it was like the second time it happened, and in those having to investigate those things, and again, there's a good reason to have them there, but at the same time, there's the potential for a lot of false positives, especially when you have a power user like me that does all the things that they're not supposed to do, or the average user isn't doing. Right, and every organization is going to have a couple of those.
Yeah. And we see it pretty consistently, where we'll take some sort of, super action, dump NTDS or, dump LSAS, things like that. And the security products just aren't reporting in time. So, it's not until about 6 or 8 hours later when we've already walked off with the keys of the kingdom that they, send an email alert, saying, hey, this action was picked up. Just a real big gap in the industry, I think.
Yeah, because you generally don't want to automate a response on something like that. Yeah. You want to have that kind of human touch to check it and investigate it. And, there's 24/7, SOCs and whatnot, but still, you could already have the keys to the kingdom already gone. And and that's why there's so many tools in the industry. And I get why there are so many, because there's so many different avenues of attack. I mean, we didn't even talk about the physical penetration testing and the physical access piece of it yet, but that's a huge part of it. And I talk to customers all the time about this for as long as I can remember. I'm like, yeah, email is still the number one attack vector, but your firewall or your email security or your Duo or whatever MFA is not going to stop you from picking up a thumb drive in the parking lot and plugging it in. Right, it's not going to protect you against that, most likely. So it's kind of complicated. But since we kind of talked about the physical stuff, I'd love to dive into that a little bit, because I always find that fascinating. I love Darknet Diaries podcast, and there's usually always a lot of good stories of guys, climbing walls and jimmying locks and trying to trick these. They'll trick the sensor on the inside of the door that detects motion, and they'll blow. I think the guy was talking about, he was blowing the cans of compressed air, so he'll flip it upside down and blow it underneath the door, and that was enough of a temperature difference and motion to trigger it to unlock the door from the inside. Like, just mind-blowing stuff. So let's dive into that, because I always find that interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
so that's something you guys do.
It is something we do. I will admit I'm not the person that's going to do that. I'm too suspect. I'm too suspect looking. But no, we have some stories.
They sent Megan in to do it, right?
Yeah, no, I don't know if I would make it very far. Yeah, I just don't know if I have the mindset. You have to have a real, clear idea what you're doing, and you can't show any nerves, right? At that point, I don't know if I could go past that line.
I don't know. I think we're onto something here. I think we got to get Megan to do this, because I think she'd be a very covert. I mean, I'm thinking back to, what was the was it Ocean's 8 that was the all woman crew, the all girl crew, right? That were I think it was Ocean's 8.
I think so. I
so.
I can't remember it. But
Ocean's 10? I don't know.
Yes, my founder has been pushing me to, he's like, you can do this, Well, one day, I promise, when I'm here, I will do a physical break-in. So now at least you have it on recording.
And you're coming to the Driven office next week, aren't you?
No. I'm not getting put in a
keep
cop
my
car.
eye on you. I'm sorry, Ryan. I totally derailed you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. We do have some stories. One of our business founders, they actually shipped a guy one time in a large chest, stuck him in there with life support, had a little peephole from the top, and delivered him right into the server room. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. I was a little shocked when I saw the box myself when I was out there, but yeah, crazy
You
story.
can't get me to do that job.
Darn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you physically shipped someone.
So
Okay.
they
Yep.
didn't
I
physically.
wanted to make sure I heard that
They
right.
played the part of the FedEx delivered. They delivered a box with a person inside. Then they delivered the team, the whoever they delivered it to, the front desk reception person, ended up moving the box back into the server room. And somebody popped out, several hours later. So
With confetti, I hope.
yeah,
Hey, one time they delivered a box that had all Easter candy in it. So they
Wow.
have, and they left it, they shipped it in, left it there for a week, and then all of a sudden people started questioning it, started panicking. They had a robot come in and actually try to disassemble it. Yeah, yep, and turned out to be just a box full of Easter candy.
Wow.
They just wanted to see how
Well,
long it would go undetected.
yeah.
wow. That's, yeah.
But everybody has
Nice.
different goals with physical break-ins, right? Some
Yeah.
is can you plug something in? Can you just access the server room? I mean, we've done it for museums, financial institutions, law firms, you name it. Just depends what they want to get out of it.
Yeah. And I think the physical penetration testing really does, it can definitely mirror the network in terms of, you can have all these, things on the outside on the perimeter, right? Whether it's a locked door or a gate or a guard, right? They have all these things on the outside to help with that perimeter. But then inside, how open is it? Do you have to use your key card to access different sections, right? Do you have a section that's just for finance, right? So the physical can definitely model and mimic the digital side of the business too, and you have to I think you kind of have to approach them both in very similar mindsets in terms of, hey, what type of security do I need for these zones, whether we're talking digital or physical. But that's cool. A box of candy, a whole big box of candy.
Hey, they've got more than that. They've got a whole theater. They've got the setup for FedEx, for copiers,
Wow.
Xerox, everything along those lines. They're ready to go. So we'll bring our
Wow.
founder on next time. He'll have some stories for you.
Yeah, no, that I think that would be a good one to dive into there. More tales from the physical pen testing.
Yeah.
So, what other are there any other types of penetration testing that we missed? I know we talked a lot about the vulnerability scanning and kind of the risk-based assessments. Obviously, physical testing. I know we kind of mentioned the phishing and smishing and stuff like that. Any others that we kind of missed on, or did we cover them all?
We do a couple other types of engagements, anything from assume to breach all the way up to red team engagements. We will also do wireless, web applications. Let me see, is there anything else I might have missed, Megan?
Nope, I think you got it all. I mean, for an organization who has never even identified their risk, looked at their infrastructure in any means, always an external internal pen test. And Brian, I'm sure you've even seen it just from the basics of bringing on a company from a managed services side, right? Where do you start
Right.
with some of these things? And you don't want to provide them the world, and now it's too overwhelming to digest.
Right, right. So this is kind of it can be, especially for large organizations, kind of a crawl walk run where you need to understand what are you working with here from a very top level down kind of setup, right? What are we working with? What are the applications you're using? What are the tools, your security tools? What are the compliances you're worried about? All that, just to kind of check what your as you said, the external and your internal kind of scans and tests.
Yeah, and even working, we work with a lot of organizations, as we mentioned. Even this past year, I'm thinking about one in particular. They've been consistently looking at pen testing. Now the next step would be that assume breach red team. They made that what could have been a minor adjustment in their infrastructure, Ryan tests their network and he's like, oh my goodness, I'm
Yeah.
seeing so many more gaps than I did last year. I don't know if they're ready for this next step.
Yeah.
So it's kind of addressing the basics first before you go on to that next step. Otherwise, it will be noise.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned, kind of next steps, and I'm curious, once we've gone through this engagement, right? I've come to you guys and said, hey, these are the things that I want to do. I don't really know what I have, or here's what I'm working with, kind of thing. And we've done that initial kind of internal and external testing and scans and whatnot. What comes out of that? What are the kind of deliverables from that, and then where do we go from there?
Yeah. So in terms of deliverables, yeah, so obviously you're going to get a report. We're going to have a report, a risk-based report, with all the findings that were gathered during the assessment or identified during the assessment. You'll also get some artifacts that accompany the report. We talk about artifacts; that's raw data. So port scans, vulnerability scans, those should be yours, right? Your client, you should have access to that raw data. So any sort of like web enumeration, you'd get the raw data with that as well too. We also sit down with every client, typically an hour to an hour and a half debrief call to go over the report from start to finish. It's a really good opportunity for organizations to bring in their technical team if they have any sort of questions. We also go over high-level remediation efforts. Every organization is different, and remediation might not be the same between company A and company B. But from a high level, this is what we found. This is how you can mitigate that exposure, and that's pretty much it. Some organizations, we don't do any sort of mitigation testing. Well, we do mitigation testing, but we don't do it up front. What we mean by that is it's hard to tell what vulnerabilities or weaknesses might exist within a company's infrastructure. So we can't really quote you for that ahead of time. But we will do mitigation testing after the fact. So if there's something that you really want us to go through and just confirm that, and you don't have that giant gaping hole anymore, that's definitely something that we can talk about after the fact. But that is an option that's always available to all our clients.
Nice. And I think, one thing that we kind of danced around, but I think we need to make very, very clear is that S&T does not do any remediation directly.
Correct. We don't do any remediation. No.
We do not sell any products, anything along those lines. So, Bryan, that's why you are so valuable, because
That's where we come in.
I'm telling you, the business started back in 1997. Our two founders started to build it up, just solely incident response and penetration testing.
Mm-hmm.
And to date, we still have some clients we work with directly, and a few of them, it's, the same findings as last year. And at that point, they need some assistance, It's trying to take that step to make sure they're secure. This isn't just, our report is useless. Now we've just pointed out, here are all the problems you have with your network. Now you have a document that's showing that you have issues.
Mm-hmm.
We need you to help build up the client. So, even from that perspective, Bryan, it would be good to dive into that on where you would take them from there, just remediation wise.
Yeah, and this is why the partnership here with Driven and S&T is so important. And I would even say, too, and I was kind of thinking about this as we were talking, it's also the partnership with the customer, right, the client, because this is not a one and done thing, right? It can't be. Things are going to be constantly changing. The threat landscape is changing. Your infrastructure is changing. Your business needs are changing, and being able to, we can talk obviously about setting up annual scans, right? Because I think a lot of customers will end up doing that, but it goes beyond that. It really, really does. The mitigation stuff, the mitigation testing, you mentioned, I think is important too. Like, hey, did I actually fix it, or did I make it worse? But this is where Driven really comes in and really can shine. So, this is not something that I really kind of talked about in terms of like promotion of the organization that I work for. But the security arm of Driven is extremely robust, and in terms of just the number of engineers we have, the tools that we have, and obviously we're working very closely with the various vendors, Palo Alto, Cisco networks, and you name them, right? We're working with all the vendors in those different areas for the best practices and the other pieces there that we need to make sure that things are working, right? If you need those products, if you need those mitigation steps, we have something in place. And we've had a number of success stories. Not myself yet because I'm new, but there's been a number of success stories with Driven working with S&T and doing the remediation piece, and again working with the client, because I think that is definitely the most vital part here. It really needs to be those three entities working together in order to make this work. And I think that's the most important part. Post remediation scans, annual scans. It needs to be a partnership because the landscape's always changing.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to keep the business operational, right? Your
Right.
organization, because at that point, you're not even talking about you could be down for days, weeks, months if you get hit. I mean, think about production being hurt, think about your employees not getting their paychecks, reputation, all those things you can't replace.
Right.
Right? I mean, not even going into the technical portion if they've locked up your backups, everything along those lines and how things are structured. It's making sure that everything's secure and you can operate as you should.
Right.
It's fun getting to learn every, industry, every organization, and what they do. Because I don't live that world, right? So it's trying to make sure that we're giving our best foot forward and helping them understand where their gaps are in terms of cybersecurity.
Nice. Ryan, any thoughts?
Um, no, no, not specifically. I mean, I think Megan kind of nailed it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I stole the
Nice.
words out of your mouth.
yeah,
There you go. There you go. No, I think that's the important part, right? Because we talk a lot about the fun pieces of the penetration testing, especially the physical stuff. I always enjoy that. I think that's really cool, and I would love to be involved in something like that at some point if we can figure out if we can get a box big enough to ship me in. I'll gladly volunteer.
We know you're our guy.
But I think I think the biggest piece to really take home here is that this is something that organizations really need to look into, because what is it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of remediation, right? You don't want to be caught at the tail end of an attack trying to figure out what we could have done differently. You would much rather get ahead of it. And I know that this industry in general, it can be hard to get ahead of those kind of things, right? And this is where we look to various pieces of automation to try to alleviate some of the day-to-day stuff so that we can focus on the digital transformation and all these cool things that we can do for the organization to help better them, but at the same time, keeping security top of mind, because it's just getting crazier and crazier out there.
There's a new article every day.
Yep, every single day. And there's no one way to do it. I talked about that every time I talked to a customer. When I was at Cisco, just like, hey, listen, there's no silver bullet here. There's not even a single vendor that's going to be able to cover it all. You're just not. There are some that are better than others. There are some that work well with each other and with others better, and that's fine. And this is where Driven can help with navigating. Like, hey, we've identified a need for this particular security tool, right? And just to keep it simple, right? Let's just say MFA, right? This is one of the biggest vulnerabilities that you have here is that you don't have MFA. This is where we can kind of help navigate, figuring out what is the best type of MFA or whatever. And it's a silly example. It's a very easy one, but still, this is where the partnership comes in. S&T is filled with very smart people there that know what they're doing in terms of trying to look for those vulnerabilities and look for those entry points in and really kind of test out your environment to test what you have in place. And then Driven can help with the remediation steps. And, we just kind of keep that cycle going and keep things moving right along. So awesome stuff. This has been great. I've really appreciated the time. I'll kind of go around the horn. Ryan, I'll start with you if you have any final thoughts or closing arguments.
I'm afraid I don't. I mean, it's been great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So,
of course, thanks for coming on. Megan, final words.
Our goal is to get a physical break-in. Ryan, that's on your list. We're going to work together. We're going to find a client. And we'll get that scheduled, right? No, I
I
appreciate
like
it.
it.
It's been a great partnership. I think I think we touched on everything, right? I mean, it's not, we talked about compliance, cyber insurance, everything. Really is trying to push those clients just stay on the proactive side. You're never going to
Yeah.
be 100% secure. We're working with risk levels here. And that goes
Hmm.
both sides. We don't want to be the negative aspect of just providing a report and sitting on your desk, and vice versa. It's helping you grow your clients to say, here's where your risk is. Let's focus on that and then work on, other vulnerabilities over time that might be a longer push. So, it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to working with you more in the team. So appreciate you having us on.
Thank you, Megan. And I'll tell you the call to action here. If you want to learn more, which you should absolutely be wanting to learn more now, reach out to us. Let's get on a call. I mean, Megan is awesome on the phone. I've been on the phone now with her in front of customers a couple times now, and she's just incredible on the phone, as you can tell, right?
No, he has
So,
to say that. It's because I'm right here.
hey, $50 is $50, right? Sorry, that's a throwback to my episode with Chandler over at Pure Storage. He did the same thing to me, where he was complimenting me, and he said the exact same thing.
That's great.
But no, honest, for real here, like, reach out. Let's have the conversation. This is kind of one of the beautiful parts about my role here now at Driven, is that I am more accessible. We have the connections with the vendors, and of course organizations like S&T, to be able to do this. So let's have a conversation. Let's see where your head is at in terms of what your needs are, whether it's cyber insurance, or compliance, or any of those things, right? Just, hey, I just need a sanity check to make sure that I'm actually as covered as I think I am, right? It is worth its weight in gold, and I have a feeling that you're going to find something that you didn't know about. So reach out. Hello at conft.show, through the comments in the YouTube or wherever. Just reach out and let's have this conversation. But all that being said, thank you once again for listening to Conf T with your SE, and thank you to my two wonderful guests for coming on the show today. Be sure to like, subscribe, do all the cool social network stuff. And don't forget, merch is out now, shop.conft.show, to get your mugs, shirts, and all that fun stuff. But thanks again for listening. Until next time, stay safe out there. Don't forget to save that config.